I see you, little mouse. Welcome back to another video in Noodle's complete Path of Exile lore series. This video is part 1 of the Zana, Shaper, and Elder story. Let's begin. Once we complete the 10 story acts of Path of Exile, we meet a new NPC in the epilogue of the restored Oriath Square. Her name is Zana, and she has just returned from Wraeclast because we have defeated Kitava. Impressed, she asks us to join her in a new side area from the square called the Templar Laboratory. Zana tells us her father, who has been missing for 20 years, was working on something in this laboratory when he disappeared. She has been putting together the story of his disappearance, what he was working on, and what happened to him. She wants us to help her in this quest. While we will later discuss Zana, her journey, and what we do for her, let's establish the story of Zana's father. 20 years ago, the High Templar of Oriath was a man named Venarius. Venarius was raised by his poor, single mother in Theopolis. In Synthesis League, an old man named Kavas ushers us into fragmented memories to help him discover his own past, as he has completely lost his memory. These memories belong to many different people across time and space, including Merveil, Mayor Ondar, and the Watchers of Decay, who we will discuss later. One of the memories we explore is told from the perspective of a young boy, which is actually young Venarius, who, spoilers for Synthesis League, is actually Kavas. In this memory, young Venarius recounts that a man in uniform visits. He is from the courts. He says the Templar have alms for widows like my mother, but she must collect in person. We go to the church together, and I wait outside in the gardens. Mother comes from around the rear. She looks pale. Her eyes are red, and her clothes are torn. She doesn't look at me, but she grabs my hand. The man comes over often after that, with toys and food, but I don't like him. Venarius's mother was presumably used by this Templar in exchange for provisions for her family. In another memory from young Venarius, he was almost exiled, presumably to Wraeclast, with a group of Marraketh and homeless people. I feel it. At 8 years old, I was almost exiled by mere happenstance. If my mother had not found me and gotten the Templars to release me, I would have been lost. It's interesting to note that, even before Dominus and Piety used exile to Wraeclast as a means to experiment on people secretly, traveling to Wraeclast via portal and capturing exiles for their thaumaturgical experiments, being exiled to Wraeclast was punishment used for years before, with knowledge of the cataclysm and the horrible condition of Wraeclast. Because of his low status and mistreatment, Venarius grew to resent the order of the Templars. So, as he grew up, he decided to become a Templar to recreate the order from the inside out. Kavas, as he begins regaining his memory as High Templar Venarius, says, "I was a Templar, yes, but now I remember that I secretly despised them. I understood that they were a diseased organization prone to brutal oppression. Maybe I kept my thoughts to myself and lived a life of quiet desperation, but I feel like I was the kind of man to act. So what did I do? By following the Templars' rules and keeping his opinions hidden once in the order, he was able to ascend all the way to High Templar. But once Venarius was in power, he became obsessed with fortifying that power. Venarius was interested in the cataclysm of Wraeclast, the powers behind such an atrocity, and in particular the works of Malachi. He sent smugglers over to Wraeclast to find powerful eternal artifacts. From one of these smuggling expeditions, a device was found that the smugglers called miraculous. Venarius had the device delivered secretly from Wraeclast to him in his laboratory, but the device was in pieces. So he recruited one of Oriath's most resourceful and astute researchers, the Chief Archon, Valdo Caesarius, to restore the device. Valdo Caesarius is Zana's father. Valdo's title of Chief Archon meant that he was a public figure in Oriath. The term Archon comes from ancient Greece and means a title of a specific public office, a ruler. Zana tells us that her father was a well-educated man. He worked as a researcher in Oriath back when they were allowed to research more than just holy texts. Valdo had experience with researching thaumaturgical books and artifacts that had once been heretical, but studying these was now endorsed by the Templars. In Valdo's journals, he writes, "Some time ago I was commissioned in the repairing of a strange device, a golden machine found broken in the ruins of Wraeclast. The High Templar asked that I restore it and weaponize whatever powers it might contain. Venarius did not simply want to rebuild the device, he wanted to weaponize it to some end." Although Valdo had history with eternal artifacts, he was concerned by Venarius's desire to weaponize this device upon its completion. But the High Templar's notoriety for violence against disobedience forced him to work. He wrote, "I'd considered refusing Venarius. Though my personal politics remain my own, I've often struggled to follow his instructions and rule, filled with such malice and hunger. Regretfully, I accepted his orders, for I know of many families who have refused the High Templar before. They have all vanished now." High Templar Venarius, in his desire to transform the High Templars from the corrupt and useless institution he perceived them as, had swung the pendulum to being dominating, cruel, and power-hungry. Valdo Caesarius did not agree with Venarius's ideals, but he was left with no choice. So Valdo began reconstructing this miraculous device in the Templar laboratory in secret, only known to himself, Venarius and his highest court, and his daughter, Zana. As he began the repairs, he realized that something was different about the device. First, it began having effects on Zana. Though I saw it as mostly inconsequential at the time, it is worth noting my daughter, a quiet young thing of 5, suffered nightmares and tantrums unlike any I'd seen during those former weeks I spent working on the device. We know that thaumaturgy and the beast are intertwined, and the beast is often referred to as Nightmare. It can speak to people through dreams. There's a possibility that the events that are about to unfold are related to the nightmare itself. The second thing Valdo noticed while repairing this device was that it was missing some essential piece. Valdo was unable to rebuild this relic, whatever it was. Though it seemed to be mostly functioning, something important appeared to be missing. Worse still, it seemed as if the part required didn't exist. Not in our reality, anyhow. The thing that made it tick, the thing that was mysteriously vacant, I could only conceive of in the half-baked imaginings of my own mind. In a way, Valdo himself was being influenced by the machine, and possibly Nightmare, having visions of the missing piece that he could not fathom but could vaguely imagine. One day, after working long hours on this mysterious device, Valdo fell asleep at the base of it, and when he awoke, he was no longer in the Templar laboratory, but had been transported to a beautiful realm he refers to as the Dreamlands. Valdo's awakening in the Dreamlands is the beginning of his saga journaled in his Book of Memories. I'll explain later more about this Book of Memories, but they are 16 journal entries written by Valdo regarding his work on the device, these Dreamlands he discovered, all the way up to his disappearance. As he begins exploring this beautiful and different land, he realizes he is being followed, but not by a man, by a shade, a whisper of embodied smoke, barely heard or seen amongst the vegetation. It rose and spoke to me not through language, but through thoughts and pictures, colors and emotions, bursting into my mind like water, billowing up through cracks in the earth. The shade welcomed me to its land and asked how it was that I arrived. This shade knew of the mysterious device Valdo had been working on and was interested in helping him repair it. The machine was a doorway between my world and the Dreamlands, I was told. The device had been lost, broken and torn apart by villains and thieves. The shade was overjoyed to hear it found and offered to help me rebuild that final missing part. So the shade had prior experience with this device to the extent of understanding how it worked well enough to help Valdo create the missing part, the power source, like nothing in Valdo's world. That would allow the device to be used once more. The Shade, although lacking a body, had powerful thaumaturgy and began teaching Valdo some of its thaumaturgical abilities. Its ability to communicate in a dreamlike way, via images and feelings, is reminiscent of the Beast and Nightmare, but it is something else entirely. Perhaps the Dreamlands itself had some more powerful connection to thaumaturgy. Maps we've seen before, like Malagaro's Sanctum, use thaumaturgy to open portals to different worlds by the power of Nightmare. Malachi was aware these maps were connected to Nightmare and thus thaumaturgy. Or maybe the Shade itself had such amazing powers of thaumaturgy that it was capable of doing and teaching these feats regardless. Either way, for weeks, Valdo would sleep by the device in the Templar laboratory each night, and in his sleep he would apprentice myself to the Shade, allowing it to teach me the ways of this strange place. I learned how to shape and build things from my imagination, forming them in thin air as if by some great thaumaturgical marvel. It was through this tempering of the mind that I, under its instructions, began rebuilding the missing component of the device. And most exciting of all, how to transport such phantasmagorical treasures back into the world of man. With the Shade's instructions, Valdo would be able to create the power source for the device in the Dreamlands and transport it into the Templar laboratory in Oriath. High Templar Venarius checked in with Valdo regarding the progress of the device's restoration, eager to have this weapon finished. Valdo did not tell Venarius about his experience with the Dreamlands. He would lie and make excuses, so he could continue this mysterious research in secret. The Shade was also very eager to help Valdo finish this missing piece, telling Valdo we would open the gateway between worlds, and then all the goodness of these lands would flow out into Oriath, leading us into a new age of prosperity. And for the Shade's help, all that the Shade asked of me was to return the favor when the time came. Finally, as the piece was completed, the Shade shared a secret with Valdo. The Shade shares with Valdo a vision of the past, how the Shade was once king of the Dreamlands. The Shade recounts that a sect of hateful men and women, the Watchers of Decay, rose up to destroy the Shade. Questing to control the land, these terrorists fashioned a powerful blade meant to divorce the king's spirit from his body and curse it to wander his former kingdom while his body blistered in stone. This is how the king became this disembodied Shade. He is the mind locked out of his body. Valdo feels pity for the Shade, writing, "I was mortified. How could people do such cruel things to this humble creature? And where were these villains now? Had they been the same ones whom had made off with the device? Had they been the ones who severed the connection between worlds and ruined its function?" The Shade urges Valdo to follow him deeper into the Dreamlands to see the statue of his body. The Shade led me deep into a dark forest and revealed to me in the depths of a forgotten cave a statue cast from black marble, pierced by what I assumed to be the very same sword from my visions. This sword is known as Starforge. Fun fact, there are 3 people in the Order of the Jinn, which Jun is a part of, that had a hand in getting Starforge to these Dreamlands. Egrin was an Asmiri who was abandoned by his people due to his visions that inspired Tarkus Varuso to lead the Asmiri into the Val ruins, a journey which cost thousands their lives. Egrin forged Starforge, and his story is seen on Elder Scarabs. Chianga was a mute wind, one of the warbands like Wayland's Brinerot, who was cast out for being different. She delivered the Starforge to the Watchers, and her story is told on Shaper Scarabs. Batusia was an orphan from the Eternal Empire, tasked with investigating maps once in the Order of the Jinn. It's unclear if Batusia was male or female, but Batusia helped use the Starforge against the Shade, and is seen on Cartography Scarabs, the Gilded Scarab reading, "The Order of the Jinn survives because of your sacrifice, but will be forever wounded by your loss." From this information, we know the Shade had some connection with Wraeclast, as these three and the Watchers worked together to seal the Shade, this king, and the statue in the Dreamlands, but lived on Wraeclast themselves. When Valdo sees the statue of the Shade's body, he begins to have doubts. The effigy was frightening, utterly terrifying to behold. The creature it depicted, a violent and abhorrent thing, stood amidst an altar of ancient wood and bone. The being in the statue did not look human, but monstrous, creature-like. The Shade urged Valdo to pull the blade from the statue, to free him, to allow mind and body to reunite. While Valdo initially reached for the sword, he decided to ask the Shade more questions, and, at merely the suggestion of rebellion, the Shade flew into a fury. It flamed red, full of rage, and though it could not speak, it made its intentions very clear. Previously, the Shade had sent Valdo visions to teach and assist him, but now the Shade used its power of entering minds to terrify and threaten him. I felt my mind torn asunder as images of murder and mutilation were forced upon me. I was doing things, terrible things to the ones I loved, to my daughter. Valdo fled, running from the statue in the Shade and hiding in a foxhole, until after a long time he eventually fell asleep and woke up in the Templar laboratory. Valdo ran to his daughter Zana after having experienced these horrible visions of harming her, and promised he would never, ever let her go again. And for months, Valdo stopped working on the device, instead researching as much as he could about it and the Shade. During these months of study, Valdo said that every day the slimed and poisoned tendrils of fear grip ever tighter into his flesh, making one wonder if the Shade still had some access to his mind, or if this is just an aptly foreshadowing description of Valdo's mental turmoil. Eventually, Aramir, a scholar whom Valdo greatly admired, sent him a shipment of artifacts about the Watchers, the hateful men and women that had sealed the Shade out of its body with the Starforge. We have met Aramir, who now lives amongst the Asmiri on Wraeclast. We know he worked with High Templar Venarius' successor, Dominus, to research thaumaturgical artifacts of the Val and other people of Wraeclast, so it is likely that Aramir and Valdo Caesarius have a history of working together. According to the artifacts sent by Aramir, the Watchers of Decay and the people of Wraeclast were terrorized by a being they called the Elder. This Elder was a creature of malignant madness, born of that oblivion from before time itself began. Once only an abstract expression, the Elder was given a physical form. The Elder is not a creature or a god, but some embodiment of evil that has existed forever. The Elder created this bauble, importantly not the device Valdo has been working with, to enter Wraeclast. It fashioned for itself a bauble of chaos and secret worlds to use as a kind of hunting ground. This bauble is undoubtedly the Dreamlands I've uncovered. It seems the Elder could travel between worlds, like we can when we use a map device, and perhaps the Dreamlands was just another one of these worlds. Perhaps it is the original location the Elder manifested for its physical form. Either way, the Elder hungered and traveled to Wraeclast to satiate itself. The artifacts said that the Elder came here out of hunger, referring victims of a younger flesh. It became the boogeyman, dragging our children off into the night, casting them into its realm of shadow and feasting upon their nightmares undisturbed, for it was imagination that truly satiated it. The Elder captured the children and took them to its dreamlands before feasting on them, where their fate could be presumed but was ultimately unknown. Again, the hunger for nightmares is an interesting parallel to the beast and its power of nightmare. Whether there's any relationship between the beast, thaumaturgy, and the Elder isn't made explicit, but there's obvious themes between all of them. Imagination as a fuel, having power and influence over dreams and imagination, and giving others access to thaumaturgy. Regardless, the Watcher's artifacts say that the Elder was trying to sustain and birth forth its true self, the oblivion from outside time and space, the decay. The Elder, even when its shade and body were unbroken, had not reached some final true self, some form or goal it wanted to achieve, and needed the fuel of imagination to become the decay the Watchers believed was its ultimate goal. One of the memories from Synthesis League is from someone who experienced the Elder's terror, perhaps even a Watcher themselves. They recall, "We pursue the demon on foot to the edge of the woods. The child it carries does not cry out. Aneris follows closely, but I hesitate out of fear. The demon and child are gone, and Aneris stands frozen, pale as the moon. He whispers something I do not understand and falls dead. I fear we will be hunted to extinction." This memory shows that many children had already been captured by the Elder, to the point that this person worried about extinction. Those adults who stood in its way or fought back were killed. Like Kitava, it seems the Elder had an almost endless hunger, but on an even more devastating scale. The Watchers of Decay could not destroy the Elder itself, but by locking up its physical form in the Dreamlands, they were able to prevent the Elder from continuing to feed and grow, and to stop the process of this decay. With help from members of the Order of the Jinn, they created the Blade Starforge, and they also were the creators of the exact device Valdo has been restoring to enter the Elder's pocket dimension, the Dreamlands. Valdo writes, "They built the device, bringing with them the blade, a weapon capable of divorcing agency from form to give the Elder a kind of eternal rest. Because the Elder cannot be killed. In that statue, they left it starved, unable to hunt. But as Valdo had experienced, the Elder's form may be trapped in stone, but its agency roams free. I have met it." The shade that had assisted Valdo in restoring the Watcher's device was this Elder. Thank you so much for watching. It's your boy Noodle. I know most people wanted to see longer videos in one installment, but that video would be 50 minutes and I've been behind on videos, so it's broken into 2 parts. Thanks as always to my patrons. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or check out my stream at twitch.tv/KittenCatNoodle. And until part 2, stay sane, Exile.